Clark, what are your thoughts on whether the Cowboys should extend Dak this offseason?
You know, I don't think that they should extend Dak right now, but let's be honest, the contract that Dak Prescott is playing under is the contract that Dak Prescott earned at the time. And when you give someone a contract, it's because of what they've accomplished and what you project they'll accomplish going forward. And if you're looking at this team and you're looking at Dak Prescott in his last year, the way that he turned the football over, the way that we watched him play in the big moments against the San Francisco 49ers, going forward, that doesn't say that Dak Prescott is the quarterback that can get the Dallas Cowboys to the Super Bowl that has eluded them for over the last quarter century. But Dak Prescott has to come back this year and show that he is the guy that they signed. He is the guy that's worth over $40 million plus. And when you think about incentivizing a quarterback or pushing a quarterback to be better, you don't do that by giving them an extension. Now, on the business side of what the Dallas Cowboys have to do, they have to think about how extending Dak Prescott and giving him a team-friendly extension allows them to move and maneuver with the salary cap and add pieces around Dak, which he truly needed in order to perform at a higher level. And so I do think it's tricky, but from the standpoint of does Dak Prescott now deserve more money, now deserve more guarantees, I don't believe he does.
Interesting. You disagree?
Well, for me, it's more about the salary cap. And I think Dak, here's the thing. A few weeks ago, we had conversations about the Cowboys, and at the start of the season, we didn't think the Cowboys could be in the Super Bowl. As the season went on, we had conversation on this show. I'm sure Ryan Clark was a part of them on NFL Live too, where it's like, oh, could the Cowboys? Could they win the Super Bowl? Are they a team with this quarterback? Like, here's the thing. I understand that Dak did not have a good year. I understand the turnovers, the interceptions, uncharacteristic of what his career has shown. But when you look around the league at quarterbacks, I just don't understand the idea that you have a really good one and you don't want to pay them, or you just say, I mean, he hasn't, like Josh Allen, correct me if I'm wrong, Josh Allen hasn't won a Super Bowl, right? No, but there's belief in that building that he can lead them there. I think Dak has shown over his career that he can win. But when you change the offensive coordinator, when you have questions about the head coach, when you have questions about the roster, it can't just offensive line. You can't just put it on the quarterback.
Right, but they have a question to ask about: do they want to extend him? Do they want to commit to him at the level that quarterbacks are getting paid now, Tim? And that's that's approaching, or maybe even by the end of this offseason, topping $50 million a year. Would you extend him at this point?
I would absolutely extend him. Dak Prescott isn't even 30 years old. And you know that he can play. Did he turn the ball over more this past season than you would like? Sure. You can also go through those interceptions and look at a fair number of them that you could argue that other people didn't do their job as well. I mean, just think to the Jacksonville game where ball bounces off a guy's chest and gets returned for a score, a game-winning score. So, look, here's what I would say, in terms of Dak. Like, is he good enough to win a Super Bowl? The answer, in my opinion, is 100% yes. You have that guy in your building that you can win a Super Bowl with. And he's not even 30 years old. I'm extending him, absolutely. And to be honest, if you don't, I think you end up putting yourself in a worse situation at the quarterback position.
That's the question, right, RC? And I remember the last time they were talking about extending him and listening to Orlovsky say, you don't want to ever pay a good quarterback, great quarterback money. That's a trap teams fall into, right? And is that the kind of thing you're talking about, that he hasn't shown the ability to play at that great quarterback level?
So I thought the extension that Dak received, he deserved. And I thought he deserved it before having to play on the franchise tag early on in his career in Dallas. I thought the way that team was playing and also where Dak was headed. And we saw a little bit of that in the first season after receiving the extension in those first 6 games before hurting the calf. And so in looking at Dak Prescott, I think you're in a very difficult position. I agree with much of what Tim said. When Dak Prescott plays at his highest level, when Dak Prescott Prescott plays to the potential we've seen him play, he's a Super Bowl caliber quarterback. But we also understand the views on Dak Prescott. I believe now they're tinkering along the views of Kirk Cousins with less production. And so I believe watching Dak Prescott play this year under new coordinator, under a new scheme, with some more players around him, gives you a better view of where you're headed. We're not talking about the Minnesota Vikings. We're talking about the Dallas Cowboys and Jerry Jones and the way they've maneuvered at the quarterback position, and also with giving contracts to Dak Prescott.
So Patrick Mahomes, endorsing Bieniemy on Twitter, said there should be no questions on how great of a man / coach Bieniemy is. His leadership has a direct impact on the person I am today. 10 plus years learning under one of the greatest coaches of all time, and I cannot wait for him to continue to prove doubters wrong. Kimberly Martin, your thoughts on what Eric Bieniemy had to say in Washington?
I only have one thought after watching that, and the thought is Eric Bieniemy, under no circumstances, should be the Washington Commanders' offensive coordinator, point blank, period. He should not be, because he's overqualified for that position. And that's what frustrates me about this situation. Eric Bieniemy said all the right things, all the things you have to say when you know that the playing field is not always level, when you know that the goalposts constantly move and bend with the direction of the wind, depending on the season or the year or the day. And so he had to take the high road. He deserves to be a head coach, especially when you watch the Super Bowl and you saw that two of the coordinators on the losing sideline are now head coaches, and Eric Bieniemy is in Washington, a franchise that we constantly have talked about being the very definition of dysfunction, a franchise that will hopefully soon there'll be some sort of resolution on ownership, that the team could change hands. There's so many unknowns with this franchise, and that's what frustrates me. I have no doubt that Eric Bieniemy will get the most out of these players. I have no doubt that these players are excited for him. A two-time Super Bowl champion and two-time Super Bowl MVP in Patrick Mahomes gives his endorsement, so I'm going to give more credence to that than Shady McCoy. But the fact that Eric Bieniemy is even in this position, I'm not going to lie, it is frustrating to see.
RC?
You know, I do not like his very toxic positivity. He has a toxic level of optimism that truly, truly pains me, because I feel many of the things that Kimberly A. Martin just said, and yet listening to Eric Bieniemy, I actually don't want to say them. I, like her, am trying to understand, as the goalposts continues to move, that two coaches that lose in the Super Bowl, one that is supremely outcoached in the second half by Eric Bieniemy and by Andy Reid, both of those coaches are now head coaches in the NFL. And when you look at Eric Bieniemy and his resume, what he's accomplished, much to the accomplishments of a Doug Peterson, much to the accomplishments of a Matt Nagy, he's done more than both of those coaches who were awarded head coaching positions, coaching and being the offensive coordinator under Andy Reid. And so, but this is Eric Bieniemy betting on himself. This is Eric Bieniemy leaving a Patrick Mahomes and going to Sam Howell. This is an Eric Bieniemy leaving the Hunt family and going to dysfunction in the ownership position in Washington. And so there are so many things right now that are stacked against him. And my thought on it is this: maybe Eric Bieniemy has figured to himself, you know what? I'm not going to get that head coaching job this way or that way, the way I was in Kansas City. So it's time for me to move on and try something else. Maybe this is a move out of desperation to say I have to put myself in one of the worst positions and show that I can coach my way out of that position in order to be considered a good enough leader, a good enough man to be the head coach of some other organization. This is a difficult pill to swallow, because I don't feel that Eric Bieniemy deserves to have to prove himself in this sort of situation. But because of his toxic toxic optimism, his toxic positivity, I'm going to sit here and wait. And I'm going to hope that he does an amazing job coaching. And I'm going to hope that next year we can sit here and point to all the positivity and all the great things he did in Washington to say this is why he now deserves a coaching job. Or I'm going to wait for someone in some of these 15 or 16 head coaching interviews that he's had to tell us the reason why he is now the offensive coordinator in Washington.
16 head coach interviews with 15 different teams. Obviously, Bieniemy has become the symbol of a persistent diversity problem that the league has acknowledged, but has so far failed to fully correct. Tim Hasselbeck, if that's what he's doing, he's decided his better route to try and become a head coach is to leave Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs and go to Washington, try and build his own thing there. Is that the right decision for him?
I actually don't think that it is. I think, Ryan probably touched on it with maybe it feels like a desperation because of the, move, because of the landing spot. I think that, in terms of career move, you would much rather be in a scenario where you either are staying in Kansas City, and I think all expectations would be that there would continue to be wild success in Kansas City with how that's structured, or go somewhere, like, say, the Chargers, where they too have a really good quarterback and some talent on the roster. And so you could argue that the path to success, is easier with a team like the Chargers than a team like Washington. And so in terms of hey, is that the best career move? I would say no. To go to a team that is going to start a second-year quarterback that has one start under his belt, in an organization that's going to go through massive change at the ownership level and probably other issues. No, that's not the best career move, really, for any coordinator, much less a coordinator that has had success. So, look, it maybe is his path to becoming a head coach because if Sam Howell shows, promise, it's going to be impossible to deny what, Bieniemy has done for someone like Sam Howell. But I don't think that is the best career move for Eric Bieniemy, no.
You've seen just this season what happens when you give a QB some weapons.
So a lot of this started, I believe, in this studio.
Listen.
With what? Mike Tannenbaum, right? Tannenbaum brought this up. Once
yes.
the Bears had the pick, he's like, you know what? They should trade Justin Fields.
He likes chaos. That is Mike Tannenbaum. He just wants to watch the world burn. And so that is what happened.
And that fair enough. But however, it's not the craziest take he's ever, right? The idea of if you think Young is the better player and you can restart the clock on the contract, but if
it's that front office logic.
I'm not defending him. I'm saying this is Tim, do you see any logic in this idea at all? The idea of trading Justin Fields and resetting with Bryce Young, if you're the Bears?
Look, here's the thing. There is logic to it. It's really basically what the Jets tried to do with Sam Darnold and Zach Wilson. They just wanted to reset the clock on, a rookie quarterback deal. So I understand what Mike Tannenbaum was saying when he proposed it. And look, if you think Bryce Young is actually better than Justin Fields, then sure, go ahead and do it. I just don't know why you would think that. I mean, Justin Fields, I believe, has shown enough promise at the NFL level to want to build around him. He's physically more talented. There's enough there for me to say, I actually think Fields is the better prospect still. And I think if you build around him, you probably have a better path to success.
RC, sounds like you agree.
Guys, this is about birds and bushes, right? A bird in the hand, man, is better than two in the bush. You're not asking the question, is Bryce Young a better quarterback prospect coming out of Alabama than Justin Fields was leaving Ohio State? What you're asking is Justin Fields a franchise quarterback? Is Justin Fields a quarterback you can win around? Is the dude you already have in your building worth putting pieces around in order to work to win a championship? And I believe that Justin Fields has answered that question. Justin Fields has shown you with nothing around him, with nothing up front, with no one on the outside, he can produce offense. He can keep you in games. And now build around him with with a ton of capital in the salary cap and also having the number 1 pick that you could trade and stockpile more picks. You're set up to build around a young quarterback, much as we saw the Philadelphia Eagles do with Jalen Hurts last year. So why wouldn't you do it? Why wouldn't you take what's a known commodity in your building that you're comfortable with and build around it rather than going and get a guy in Bryce Young who you don't know as much about?
Which is what
I'm
Kimberly
not
suggested,
sure where that
right?
music comes from.
Make the team better around. I don't know where the music comes from either. It just appears in our ears. We'll work on finding that out. Tim, what do they need to do? What do they need to do to make things better around Justin Fields?
Well, listen, I look at their receiving core. I mean, look, there's a reason they traded for Chase Claypool late in the year. I think they looked at, this upcoming draft, the prospects that were coming out and thought, listen, that's why we want to go get Chase Claypool right now. So they need better players around him on the offensive side of the ball. I think they just need better players in terms of talent on the team, period. So, look, the better thing to do is accumulate good players everywhere, and part of that ends up being probably trading from your spot to accumulate more picks to add talent to the roster.
That's the thing. Maybe they can get more for the 1 pick than they could even get for Fields. We'll see what the Bears decide to do. They're in a good spot.
Thank you for watching ESPN on YouTube. For live streaming sports and premium content, subscribe to ESPN+.